Om Swastiastu. Hello everyone, we are from SGDP 6 and in this occasion, we would like to present our student project entitled UV-Induced Apoptosis. Here are our team members. We'll start by presenting the first chapter of our topic, Introduction. Background. Every day, the sun emits ultraviolet rays that can reach human skin, and these rays cannot be seen by the naked eye. All living things in this world need UV light for various purposes. However, overexposure to UV radiation can lead to serious health issues in humans, such as sunburn, premature skin aging, immunosuppression, carcinogenesis, and so on. In addition, exposure to UV radiation can induce programmed cell death or apoptosis initiated by DNA damage. Based on the author's observations, there is still a lack of literature related to the UV mechanism that induces apoptosis. Based on the background above, to find out more about UV-induced apoptosis, the authors want to explore a more deeply understanding of UV, the effect of UV on cells, the meaning of apoptosis, and the correlations between UV and apoptosis.
There are several problems that we will identify in this student project. First, what are the definition and classification of UV rays? Second, what are the positive and negative effects of UV rays on cells? Third, what are the definition and mechanism of action of apoptosis? And fourth, what are the correlation between UV rays and apoptosis? And then the purpose of this student project is to help answer and understand all the problems that have been stated above.
Next is the significances. This literature is expected to provide a sufficient understanding of ultraviolet rays, apoptosis, and furthermore the correlations between ultraviolet rays and apoptosis. We also hope that this literature will serve as a source of reference and input for further research.
Next is the general overview of ultraviolet. It is a type of electromagnetic wave which has a shorter wavelength than visible light but longer than X-rays. It's classified into three types. First, UVA, which is further classified into UVA1 and UVA2. Ranges from 320 to 400 nanometers. It causes damage in the basal layer of epidermis and can cause skin cancer. UVB ranges from 320 to 340 nanometers wavelength and can cause damage in the upper epidermis, causing sunburn. Lastly, UVC has a wavelength of 270 to 290 nanometers.
Okay, now let's talk about the effects of UV rays. So it has positive and negative effects. Firstly, let's talk about the positive effects. So major sources of vitamin D productions for humans actually comes from the exposure to sunlight. So vitamin D is actually necessary for many things. For example, it's used to maintain certain calcium levels. It's actually used to ensure adequate bone mineralization for immunomodulatory properties and many more. Okay, so did you know that early unicellular organisms from the ocean produce vitamin D from sunlight exposure? So vertebrates which evolved in the ocean actually use calcium to develop mineralized endoskeleton. So when vertebrates venture to land, they adapt to calcium-poor environment by increasing their efficiency for intestinal absorption of dietary calcium. And they took the ability to photosynthesize vitamin D3 in their skin. Okay, so UVB photons photolyze 7-dihydrocholesterol to create free vitamin D3, which is then isomerized by our body to produce vitamin D3. This is why lacking of sunlight exposure could lead to vitamin D deficiency.
UV rays also possess harmful effects towards the human body. They are capable of disrupting DNA molecules, damaging tissues and organs. How bad it can cause depends on several factors, such as the type of and intensity of radiation, the duration of being exposed, and the capability of skin to protect itself. Sunburn is the most common effect that can be seen superficially as a result of highly UV-exposed skin. However, UV rays may furthermore modify skin cells. UV rays may stimulate immunomodulation by targeting specific protein inside the cell, also causing immunosuppression by the dysfunction of immune cells and other inflammatory factors. Other than that, UV rays can cause photoaging as a result of collagen breakdown and loss of functional dermal components, leading to skin cells' loss of elasticity. UV rays can form reactive oxygen species that interrupt cell metabolism. It gives a large impact to the cell, especially the nuclear DNA. ROS oxidize the DNA nucleotides, which affects the expression of tumor suppressor genes, thus emerging cutaneous carcinomas such as melanoma and keratinocyte cancer.
Apoptosis is an ATP-dependent process of programmed cell death when cells turn on enzymes that break down their own nuclear DNA and cytoplasmic and nuclear proteins. It can happen because of physiologic and pathologic conditions.
So in general, there are two pathways of which apoptosis can take place, which are the intrinsic and extrinsic pathway. The intrinsic pathway is triggered by intracellular stress. It is a stress that happens on the inside of a certain cell. This stress will then force a reaction resulting in a key condition called the MOMP, or the mitochondrial outer membrane permeable. I will talk about it later on in the video. On the other hand, the intrinsic pathway is caused by ligand bindings and the activation of the death receptors. This one is a cause of a certain extracellular circumstances, which I will also discuss further in the later of the video. The intrinsic pathway. When the BAX and BAK is binded by the activator protein, the oligomers and form pores in the outer membrane of the mitochondria. The pause then becomes the pause of MOMP in the mitochondria and releasing cytochrome C into the cytosol. After that, the event of cytochrome C releasement and MOMP in the mitochondria trigger the formation of the apoptosis. Apoptosis is formed when the cytochrome C binds to the APAF1 or activator protein factor 1, the ATP, and procaspase 9. Procaspase 9 then gets activated into caspase 9. Caspase 9 then starts cleaving procaspase 3 and procaspase 7 in order to activate them. The now cleaved caspase 3 and 7 then activate other procaspases into caspases like caspases 2, 6, 8, and 10, and much other. The activation of these procaspases mark the beginning of the apoptosis amplifying cascade. And here, caspase 8, also acts as a link between the extrinsic and intrinsic pathway. So here you can see the death receptor represented on the left by TNFR1, FASSR, and DR4. The first process happens is the ligand, as represented here by the TNF-alpha in the trail and facet, will bind into the receptor, activating it. This process happens on the outside of the plasma membrane of a cell. Inside the cell, then we get the recruitment of adaptive proteins such as FAD and TRAD. I discuss about them in much detail in the actual paper. What is important to note is that the adaptive proteins will then begin the building of the ISC or DISC, death-induced signaling complex. The complex, there are actually two complexes of DISC, the complex 1 and complex 2, which is here is not fully present. The complex 1 is the anti-apoptotic complex, and the complex 2 is the pro-apoptotic. Complex 1 will limit the apoptotic capability of caspase 8, so apoptosis will not occur. Once the complex 1 is digested and reprocessed by the cell, complex 2 will be built. Complex 2 will initiate the further enhancement of caspase 8 and will release a series of caspases reaction, which will be resulted in the apoptosis of the cell.
The correlation of UV and apoptosis is that apoptosis occurs to decrease the risk of cells being malignant as a result of the DNA damage caused by the UV rays. So there are two major kinases that control the cell's response towards DNA damage, which are ATM and ATR. But today we're going to be focusing on ATR since that one is related to apoptosis. So ATR is responsible for dealing with replication stress, which is essentially one of the DNA damages done by UV rays. They create replication blocking lesions, which disturbs replication and causes a series of events, creating RPA-coded ssDNA structures, which activates ATR along with several mediator proteins such as TOP-BP1 and Rhino. This activated ATR mediates phosphorylation of the p53 tumor suppressor gene at SAR15, which in the end induces apoptosis. So apoptosis occurs so that the cells don't become malignant as a result of the damage caused by the UV rays.
So next is the correlation of UV rays and apoptosis. One example of this is the damage caused to skin cells like sunburn. UV rays from the sun can cause damage to the DNA in skin cells, which can lead to mutations and the development of skin cancer. To prevent this, skin cells have mechanisms to detect and repair DNA damage. However, if the damage is too severe, the cell will undergo apoptosis to prevent the damaged DNA from replicating and potentially causing more harm.
And now for the treatment. In response to UV-induced apoptosis, cells have developed several repair mechanisms to fight DNA damage. The most important repair mechanism that often occurs in various organisms is the photoreactivation mechanism using the photolyase enzyme. Specifically for skin damage like sunburn, there are self-care tips for sunburn relief. First, leave the sun as soon as you can. Second, apply a fresh towel that has been dampened in cool water to cool your skin. Third, use an after-sun lotion, spray, or moisturizer such as aloe vera gel. Next, drink more water to stay hydrated. Next, take a pain reliever such as ibuprofen or acetaminophen. And the last, steer clear of products with the suffix "-cane" like benzocaine.
Conclusion: the UV ray is an electromagnetic ray that has lower wavelength than visible light, which is most common is the UVA with a length of 320 to 400 nanometers. The UV can help produce vitamin D, but longer exposure to UV can cause cells and DNA damage. The apoptosis is a breakdown process of cells. There are two pathways to reach apoptosis. The first one is the intrinsic pathway that depends on mitochondria, and second one is the extrinsic pathway that was caused by changes in microenvironment. Apoptosis can help prevent cancer by destroying affected cells, so apoptosis can be induced by UV rays. That's all we can say about UV ray-induced apoptosis. Thank you for watching this video.